Hi, it's Julie Hollinger. I'm Programs Manager for the Petawawa Military Family Resource Center, and I am here for part 3 of a series that we're creating and we've put together for the Veteran Family Program, and it's called Demystifying Your Transition. I'm here with Louise Anderson, who is the Veteran Family Program Coordinator, and her main role is dealing with the families of medically releasing and medically released veterans. And so often we find out that this process it's long and it's involved, and oftentimes families feel like they're watching it from the outside in, and they have a lot of questions and they don't really know where they can go. So we've designed this series as a way of presenting the information to you, maybe giving you some background that might be helpful to you later, and also giving you the tools, letting you know who you can ask these questions of, so you don't really feel like you are not in control in a time of your life that sometimes you can feel very out of control. I'm going to go through and introduce my guests. We are going to talk today about finances, and we're also going to talk today about the services offered by SISIP and some of the things that you should know as you're going through this medically releasing process. Jeremy Bertrand is here from SISIP. Do you like to introduce yourself and your background?
Hi there. So yeah, I'm Jeremy Bertrand, SISIP Financial, Petawawa office. I'm a certified financial planner, been in the business since going back to about 2002. Certified financial planner. I have a few other designations or specialties. And really what we deal with at SISIP is financial planning. We deal with insurance, so helping you transition through all those life stages and goals.
So what, one-stop shop for finance.
You got it, exactly.
Louise, you want to introduce yourself before we go forward?
Yeah, my name is Louise Anderson. I'm the Veteran Family Program Coordinator with the Petawawa Military Family Resource Center. I support medically releasing CAF members, medically released veterans and their families. The catchphrase is to ease the transition. So however you need me to help you, I'm here for you.
Jeremy, you talked a little bit about being a one-stop shop. A lot of us see the name SISIP. We know that it's on some of the paperwork. We walk by it on the way into the mechanics, but some people don't necessarily know all the pieces that SISIP can touch and all the ways that you can provide support for military families. Can you give us a little bit more of a background about what SISIP is, what you do, and what your role is as a financial planner?
Sure. So the basics are, at SISIP, we have 3 different branches. So insurance, financial planning, and financial counseling as well. So if we start off with what I do specifically, I'm specifically a financial planner. I am a life insurance license as well as a kind of background. But effectively what we do is we, like it said, it's a one-stop shop. Financial planning is really dealing with your investments, talking about tax, talking about will and estate planning, and that really delves into the insurance side now. Wherever we're talking about insurance, we're really getting into what's called estate planning and insurance planning, making sure your loved ones are taken care of. So we have insurance. We have 3 different kinds of insurance. We have optional group term insurance. We have T100, the type of insurance that would follow you out throughout your career and throughout your life. Then we have critical illness insurance as well. Then we have our financial counseling side. Our financial counseling is really taking a look at budgeting and helping you gain some financial literacy, and potentially if you have some money issues or financial issues, our financial counselor can help guide you through that as well.
Is SISIP available only to military members and veterans, or is it open to anybody?
It is military members and their family veterans as well, of course.
Because military families, we have a very unique type of existence. I mean, there's a lot of families that have gone through multiple times where you bought a house, you've moved from province to province, you've started different careers. And the SISIP folks will sort of understand the challenges that would be more specific to a military lifestyle, and maybe could give you some suggestions about how to prepare for those things that maybe someone wasn't familiar with the lifestyle would understand, correct?
Exactly. One of the main things is those deployments, those postings, right? Being able to service you wherever you are. That's kind of our business model as well, is we have a SISIP office or an available SISIP office at every base to help you guide you along. So you're never just lost in the weeds. Your file transfers with you anywhere that you go. You can always attempt to maintain your financial advisor that you've had contact with or been in a client advisory relationship with. But that is the model that we follow, helping the member transition from from the day that they enter all the way until their transition into their release.
Thank you. Louise, you deal with a lot of families as they go through, and I guess that that release process is another thing that's very unique to military members. It's moving from one culture, one state of affairs to another. Why is it so important for someone who's thinking about that medically released process to start planning ahead from a finance perspective?
It's really important because finance is one of the 7 domains of wellness, and it kind of touches every other aspect of your life. When you're financially stressed and you're worried about where your next paycheck is coming from or how you're going to meet your bills, that will cause internal stress as well. It also impacts marriage. People tend to fight the most about money in their marriages. When there's a problem, it's often around money and spending. And so with respect to your financial well-being, it's important to consider it before you go and get everything in line so that it takes a little bit off your plate and it helps things go a lot smoother.
Perfect. Jeremy, getting ready for this session, we were talking about some concepts and key core facets. We called it financial literacy points that people should be aware of as they were getting ready for medical release. I put together a slide here just so people could follow along a little bit more easily. Do you want to talk about what those 4 elements are?
Sure. So the first one is, whenever we're talking about specifically on the financial planning side, we really deep dive into what is the transfer value. So at your medical release, as of your release date, you're going to have 2 options, 2 basic options. Effectively, you're going to be able to take your pension at age 60. What that's called is a deferred annuity. So effectively, you're receiving your normal pension at age 60. The other option is you're going to have the option to take a transfer value. And that's kind of think of it as like the lump sum amount of what your pension would have been. So that's what a transfer value is. Now, specifically with medical releasing members, if you have 10 years of service or more, or a conjunction of reg force and or conjunction or a combination of reg force or reserve, if you have 10 years of service or more, effectively what that's going to do is you're going to have an immediate unreduced pension. So you don't have the option for a transfer value. So a lot of the times members come to me and they are asking questions based on hearsay or based on what they've heard throughout other releasing members who may or may not have had 10 years or more or 10 years less. So that message gets kind of muffled. So that delves into the transfer value versus the immediate unreduced pension. It's just that transfer value is that lump sum. The immediate unreduced pension, if you have 10 years or more, that's your only option at that point. So again, 10 years of service versus less than 10 years. Those are basically something that we handheld clients through and try to explain to them what the benefits of taking the transfer value would be versus taking the pension at age 60, the pros and cons. Emergency savings are so important. That's one thing that many of us don't have, is the emergency savings to get us through those rough times. The 3 to 6 months worth of monthly expenses. That's kind of the rule of thumb. Now with COVID, once you become a civilian, maybe that's that rule of thumb maybe should go up a little bit, maybe 6 to 9, maybe even a year worth of emergency savings, and to transition you or to get you through until your first pension payment arrives as well.
That's excellent advice, and pulling together a year's worth of savings is something that's not going to happen overnight. So going back to that idea of planning ahead, Louise, what are some other financial aspects that people should be considering in addition to those that you'd like to sort of point out to folks?
Well, as Jeremy said, the gap between your last pay and your pension pot coming in is really important. I've known families whose spouses have had to go out and get jobs to just be able to make ends meet because you didn't have that savings, that emergency fund. Other things that you may not think about is your housing, where you're living. If you're living in the PMQs, once you release, you have to leave. You can get an extension sometimes, but you need to move out, and to buy a home, you need a down payment, and it can be a considerable amount of money. And even if you want an apartment, you have to come in with first and last months, which is also quite expensive. So those are things. Your budgeting is something that you need to really look at. So, going to SISIP to get some financial counseling would be really important. Develop a 12-month budget based on your current financial situation. And you have to look at what your living expenses are going to be. Are you going to need to buy another vehicle? If you and your spouse both have to drive to work now instead of one can walk, it really just depends on what your new situation is going to be. So there are a lot of different aspects of that.
It seems to me this is a big topic, and it goes to the core of the things we talk about a lot is communication. And
Yes.
it's a lot of discussions, it's a lot of conversations that families are going to have, and things that sort of happen over time. And Jeremy, as you were going through the 4 points of family literacy, of financial literacy, it would be easy to sort of give everybody, these are the 4 things that you should do, but every family is going to be different, obviously. Jeremy, what kind of services, once somebody releases from the military, so actually we'll go in 2 steps. So before someone releases, when they're going through that medical release process, what are the kinds of things that they should be thinking about? And I'm thinking specifically because there are different services available to veterans versus members. So what services aren't they going to be eligible for once they hit that release date, and what should they be thinking about beforehand so they don't miss it?
Sure. Via SISIP, the only thing that they wouldn't be able to access is the financial counseling. So that ends at release, unfortunately. Now, what I would say is that if they're looking to look over a basic budget, if they have some questions, they can always do that before release. So that's amazing. That's amazing, or a good opportunity for them to kind of make an appointment with a financial counselor inside the branch and ask those questions. Financial planning, investment planning, that's still available through the financial planners. And insurance, it's a transition from our basic insurance, OGTI, optional group term insurance, to the insurance for release members. So again, the only thing that they wouldn't be able to access is those financial counselors.
So when you talk about financial counseling, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, and I'm going to sneak this question in there. Oftentimes when people talk about financial counseling, they think that this is a step that you take when you're in trouble, that you go to see a financial counselor when you've backed yourself up against the wall. But listening to you talk, it seems to me that there's value going, even if your finances are healthy and things are going well, that a financial counselor might be able to give you advice to make things continue going in that direction. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So one of the basic tenets of financial planning is making a budget. I think that's one of the most important things from your first day to well into your retirement as well, is a basic budget that you can follow. Now there's, every financial counselor can guide you through making a detailed one or a basic one. It's completely up to you, but that's the very, very base.
And I like the idea that you talk about the detailed versus the basic, because I think some people think, you're living on a budget and I'm going to have to write down every time I spend $1 on a coffee on a sheet instead of running tally. You can do a much broader kind of budget instead of take a look at where your money is going, correct?
That's right. So when we get into, at first, that first life stage that you get into as a 19-year-old private, you might just be thinking about basic rent and paying your car off and basic necessities. As we go into those other life stages, especially when we have kids, then we're thinking about, okay, now we have insurance to pay for. There's different aspects that we need to take a look at, and different things that we might, as an 18 or 19-year-old, may have to set aside now, right? And that, to be honest with you, is one of the major places that our members tend to potentially overspend throughout my experience. It's just, those luxuries that, aren't necessarily luxuries anymore when you have a family or, more important things to take care of.
So looking at that entire timeline, so like setting it up now when you're early in your career, so that like later on as you go through those stages, that you have a little bit more of a cushion should something happen.
Absolutely. And again, that budget should encompass that emergency fund. 3 to 6 months sitting there in cash, just waiting for, the roof to blow off your house or something like that, right?
And I think if the last 6 months have taught us anything, is that you just don't know what could happen. I mean, like, I don't think any of us sitting here thought like a year ago that we could be like in a situation where, we've been in restrictions for as long as possible, where people perhaps were looking for work as long as they were. So that's when the emergency saving really comes into play.
Absolutely. So, then we delve into the issues that I have with clients that come from another FI, and they already have a TFSA or what they deem to be an emergency fund, but it's fully invested, right? It's not sitting there in cash, it's in a risky stock portfolio, right? And I get that day in and day out, but trying to explain to clients and really set them up for a real emergency fund sitting there in cash. This isn't supposed to fluctuate up and down. If you need to use some of it, replenish it as quickly as you possibly can.
And how do you replenish it? So someone can make a call and talk to you about that. I guess the other thing, and we've touched on it a little bit, is when should someone contact you? Let's sort of go overall. Like, obviously, people should contact you as they're going through life phases. But when they're thinking about a release, should they be coming to talk to you when they have their date, when they're about to leave, or when they're starting to think about, is it time to, start thinking about that transition out of the military? Is that when they come talk to you? When are they going to get the most value out of your services?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it all depends on the individual. I would say as early as possible, but there is kind of a roadmap that they would need to follow. Obviously, I would love to have their exact dates so we could plan for it. That's not always the case right off the bat. There's pension estimates, right? We can call the pension center and get an estimate. Typically, they don't get that official estimate statement until the month of their release. But to me, the way I look at things is early as possible. The education piece for me is so important. Being able to explain to them, this is your process, this is what you're going to see, and this is the roadmap that you can follow. Now, I would love to see them when they release again. When they're actually at or closer to the release date in the month of release. That way I know everything's set in stone. We have their pension estimates and we can go through everything, including taxation, in more finer detail.
And who should be at that appointment? As a military spouse, like I know about SISIP, I don't think I've ever been to a SISIP appointment, but if I wanted to, as a family members are allowed to go and to ask questions, are they not?
Absolutely. I always encourage everybody in the family to get involved. It's interesting the perspective you'll see from the spouse as well, the different questions that will be asked. It's your pension, especially if there's a single breadwinner. One person might be risk adverse, the other person might be very risky in their investments as well. So maybe there'll be a leveling out there in terms of having both the member and the spouse there as well. But we highly encourage the spouse to come along.
Louise, there is a lot that we have talked about. There is a lot to keep track of on top of everything else. Can you talk a little bit about the binder and some of the checklists and the information that people might benefit from so they're not missing these steps along the way?
Absolutely. The binder is it's a binder, and it has pre and post sections with respect to what you can look forward to in your release process and what you have to look forward to post-release. I always go over a checklist with them. One of the things that I always suggest is that they make an appointment with SISIP and they talk to the financial counselor, because I let them know that once they're out of the military, they can't access the financial counselor anymore. I think it's also, if you look at taking care of your financial health as you do your physical health, we go to the doctors, we get checkups. We should also be doing that with our finances as well, especially if we know that our release is fairly imminent. I think that's important to mention that have a checkup, check out where you are. The binder is an organizational tool It has, like I said, it has resources after. So they mentioned SISIP a couple of times. I always tell people to go to SISIP prior to their release, just to sit down and talk to a financial planner.
And one last point, and it's a question that we added just as we were going through. When you talk about finances, we think about sort of day-to-day spending, but I think a big part of that financial piece is estate planning and what happens to your loved ones should anything happen to you. Jeremy, you had an excellent point about wills that I think would add so much value to this discussion as something people should be thinking about as they're transitioning out of the military.
Right. So if to anybody who's listening to me who's ever come into my office, I'm definitely going to ask you if you have a will, if you have powers of attorney. Now, throughout my experience, a lot of members, well, everybody has that basic military will. It may or may not facilitate your needs and your estate planning needs, especially when you have children. Perhaps you have children from a previous relationship. So all those aspects need to be taken care of. In my opinion, the basic military will is more along the lines of a check mark. And there is extreme value in going and get a professionally drafted will. As we were talking in right before the session, I made the point that in Ontario, basically, if you had a pre-existing will and you were to get married, that will could become null and void if it wasn't in contemplation of marriage to that specific individual. So that's been, that perks up a lot of it perks up a lot of ears because we do see that so much. And with insurance as well, it's whenever we talk about insurance, we actually are talking about estate planning. It's insurance. It's taking care of those loved ones. So making sure your beneficiaries are up to date. That's something you don't necessarily need to do at release. You should be doing it every year, making sure that those decisions you made last year, 5 years ago, are still intact, or if they're still the best thing for your family. But definitely will and estate planning if you have questions. Now, at the end of the day, we would need to recommend that you go and get, go seek proper estate planning advice from a professional estate planner, like a lawyer. But we can definitely give you basic advice.
This is a massive topic, and I think when it comes to finances and wills and insurance, it's one of those things that falls under the heading of you don't know what you don't know. And until you sit down and take a look at your individual circumstances and ask those questions, and sometimes it's not an easy conversation to have for some families. If you're going through financial difficulties, it might be a tough conversation, and maybe a financial planner or a financial counselor is going to help you have that conversation and make it a positive. Like let's look at the steps that we can take. It's not an easy conversation to have, but I'm sure that both Louise and Jeremy can tell you that over their time, they have definitely seen how there are situations where this planning and this advanced work really paid off in the end and made for an easier transition. So we are going to share the contact information for both Jeremy and Louise. If anybody has any follow-up questions, if they wanted to add that, if they wanted to contact Louise or contact Jeremy, we would definitely be sure we can get that. And maybe we even think about doing a follow-up session because I think there's a lot here. Thank you both for joining us. I'm just going to ask one last question. Is there anything else that you want to add? Anything that we've forgotten that if this is your last chance to give that takeaway message to somebody going through a transition, what would you want them to know? Louise?
Oh, sorry.
I'll start with Louise, then you can have the final word, Jeremy.
Okay. I think that as soon as you have an idea that you might be medically releasing, reach out for financial planning and financial counseling. Sometimes the process goes quite a bit faster than people expect it to. I've heard that several times. It was like I had it and then they told me I had this much time and now it's here and I didn't have that much time. And also bring your spouse. Bring your spouse with you because 2 heads are better than 1 and 4 ears are better than 2. So.
Perfect. Jeremy?
Yeah, so I just wanted to finish off by saying, just think of SISIP as that holistic financial planning approach. We're not just opening up RSPs and TFSAs, right? We are there really for the member throughout all those life transitions. but that insurance approach, that financial counseling approach, investment management as well, but holistic financial advice.
And if you have a military release far in your future, and maybe you're watching this because you really love talking about finances, there's a lot of people who have plans for what they're going to do when military life is over. And if that plan is something that's going to cost money, maybe having that conversation ahead of time so you can set funds away to do all those things that you want to do in the new phase of your life. This is the time to be having that conversation. Thank you both, Jeremy and Louise, for joining us. Like we said, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. Our website is cafconnection.ca, and you can find Louise, and we can definitely give you the information you need to get to your local SISIP rep. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you, Julie.
Bye.